My name is Hannah Lewis. I'm 28 years old. And for most of my life, I've lived with one very painful truth. My parents never really saw me until they needed something. Before I tell you what they eventually asked me to do and why it nearly broke me, tell me where you're watching from. And as you listen, ask yourself honestly, what would you do if the people who always made you feel small suddenly came to you for help with everything on the line? Make sure you subscribe, because the turn this story takes still shocks me when I think about it. Growing up, I wasn't the problem child. I wasn't the favorite either. I was the background child, the one who kept her grades up, did her chores, and stayed out of trouble, and somehow still never seemed to be enough. My older brother, Ryan, was the star. If he scored a goal, we celebrated as if he'd won the world championship. If he passed a basic class, my parents treated it like a miracle. If he simply tried, they cheered me. Straight A's, school awards, scholarships. I got, "That's nice, honey." Or sometimes just a distracted, "Good job," while they were scrolling their phones or talking about Ryan's next big thing. I'm not saying they were cruel. We had dinner together. We went on trips. We smiled for family photos. From the outside, we looked completely normal. But inside, it felt like there was an invisible scoreboard. And no matter what I did, my column stayed empty. I still remember one evening in high school like it was yesterday. I had just found out I was valedictorian. I'd worked for it silently. Late night studying sessions, skipped parties, group projects I basically did alone. It wasn't just a title. It was proof that I mattered somewhere. I ran into the kitchen, heart pounding with excitement. "Mom, Dad, I have news." My mom was chopping vegetables. My dad was checking something on his laptop. "I'm valedictorian," I said, grinning. "Top of my class." Mom smiled faintly. "That's nice, sweetie." Dad nodded. "Knew you'd do fine." Fine. That was it? No hug. No celebration. No "we're proud of you." 2 hours later, Ryan walked in and announced he'd made the bench on his college soccer team. My mom screamed. My dad teared up. They ordered takeout to celebrate Ryan's hard work. I sat at the table that night, staring at the plastic lid of my salad container, wondering how someone could feel so full of achievement and so empty at the same time. That was the night I learned how to clap for myself quietly. I left home for college determined to build a life that didn't revolve around their approval. I double majored. I interned. I networked. I graduated with honors and landed a job at a solid company before I even walked across the stage. I texted them the news, sent them photos, told them about promotions. They'd respond with, "Proud of you, kiddo," followed by 3 heart emojis. But when I visited home, the conversations were always about Ryan, his job search, his struggles, his relationships. I was the one they told, "You're strong. You'll figure everything out." Whenever I mentioned my stress, it sounded like a compliment, but it always came with a silent footnote. "So we don't have to worry about you." I thought that was just my role in the family. Stable, responsible, self-sufficient. Until the day everything shifted. It started like any other Tuesday. I was at work, answering emails, half listening to the buzz of office chatter. My phone buzzed with a call from my mom. We usually text, so a middle-of-the-day call felt off. I stepped into a quiet hallway and answered, "Hey, Mom, everything okay?" Her voice sounded thin. "Hannah, are you busy?" I frowned. She never asked that. "I can talk." "What's going on?" There was a pause, long enough for my stomach to tighten. "Your father and we need your help," she said. The words didn't make sense at first. Need my help? My parents were the "we've got it under control" type. They didn't ask for help. They gave orders, advice, opinions, not please. "What kind of help?" I asked slowly. She took a shaky breath. "It's complicated. Can you come by the house tonight? We want to talk in person." In person. That phrase hit like a weight dropping. "Is this about Ryan?" I asked automatically. Silence. Then, softly, no. This time, it's about us. Us. I hung up a few minutes later with a tight smile plastered on my face from my coworkers. But inside my chest, my heart pounded louder with every minute. On the drive to my parents' house that evening, my mind tried to fill in the blanks. Maybe it was health-related. Maybe they were finally retiring. Maybe it was something small, and I was overreacting. But when I walked into the living room and saw them sitting on the sofa, pale, nervous, hands clasped tightly, I knew this wasn't small. My dad muted the TV. My mom patted the seat across from them like this was some kind of formal meeting. "Hannah," my dad started, "you know we've always been proud of how well you've done for yourself." I let out a humorless laugh. "Have you?" He flinched, but didn't argue. My mother said, "You have a good job. You're responsible. You're stable." There it was again. Stable. She glanced at my dad, then back at me. "We need a favor, sweetheart," she said. "A big one?" My pulse quickened. What kind of favor? My dad finally met my eyes, and in that moment, I saw something I'd never seen on his face before. Not authority, not quiet disappointment, but fear. "Hannah," he said slowly, "we need your help to get us out of something we can't fix alone." And as they began to explain what they had done, what they had kept from me, and even from each other, I realized something that made my hands go cold. They didn't just suddenly decide to value me. They'd simply run out of options. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I wanted to be the one they turned to. I wish I could tell you I responded gracefully when my parents finally admitted they needed me. I didn't. Not because I'm heartless, but because in that moment, a lifetime of small wounds reopened all at once. I sat across from them on that sofa, trying to listen. But my mind kept drifting through years of memories I had carefully packed away. And suddenly, all the signs I ignored, all the things I trained myself to accept, came flooding back clearer than ever. Pivotal moments now seen in a harsh light, my parents shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances like they were deciding who should speak first. My dad cleared his throat. "We've been having some financial trouble." I raised an eyebrow. "You? You both always made it clear you were doing well." My mom winced. "We didn't want to worry you." I almost laughed. Worry me? They'd spent most of my life acting as if I didn't come with emotional settings. But I stayed quiet because part of me wanted to hear everything, and another part already knew I wasn't going to like what I heard. They explained, slowly and hesitantly, that for the past 2 years, they had made a series of extremely poor financial decisions. Investments they didn't fully understand. A loan they took out to help Ryan get back on track. Bills that slipped through the cracks while they were trying to maintain appearances. As they spoke, the pieces of my own past rearranged themselves in painful clarity. The celebrations for Ryan's smallest accomplishments. The way they poured money into his new hobbies. His short-lived business ideas, his impulsive ventures. The constant phrase, "He just needs a little help right now." And then there was me, the daughter who was praised for being self-sufficient, which I was slowly realizing was just code for, "You're on your own, sweetheart." The emotional fallout as they continued talking, I felt something I wasn't proud of. Not empathy, not concern, but anger, a deep, simmering anger I had shoved down for years. Every time they brushed off my achievements, every time they used my reliability as an excuse to forget I had needs to, every time they said, "Your brother is struggling, Hannah. He needs us more right now." All of it came rushing back. My mom finally said, "We're in a situation we can't get out of without help. And, well, you're the most stable one in the family." There it was again. A compliment disguised as a responsibility disguised as a burden. I stared at them, unable to speak. My father added softly, "We're afraid we might lose the house." I felt a flicker of guilt, but underneath it, stronger and sharper, was something else. Why am I always the backup plan? Why was I invisible when they didn't need me, but suddenly essential now that everything was falling apart? The first attempt at confrontation. I took a slow breath. Why didn't you ask Ryan for help? Silence. A heavy, telling silence. My mom shifted. He doesn't have the means right now. Of course, I said quietly, because every time he stumbled, you caught him, and every time I succeeded, you stepped back. They both looked stunned, as if they had never considered how their choices might have shaped our family dynamic. Hannah, my dad said gently, we never meant to make you feel overlooked. Then why did you? I asked. My voice cracked, but I kept going. Why was it always him that mattered? Why did I have to become successful just so you'd finally set me down like this? My mother's eyes filled with tears. We didn't realize. That's the problem, I said. You never realized anything about me unless it benefited you. For a moment, none of us spoke, trying to piece together why I stood up and paced the room, trying to calm the rush of emotion flooding me. Did you ever once stop and think how it felt to be the child who got a nod instead of applause? I asked quietly. My father rubbed his forehead. We just assumed you didn't need the reassurance. My mother whispered, you were always so strong, Hannah. We thought we were doing the right thing by focusing on the child who struggled. There it was, the explanation I had expected, and somehow the one that hurt the most. You didn't focus on the child who struggled, I corrected gently. You focused on the child who demanded attention, and you let the one who worked quietly grow invisible. My mom let out a soft sob. We failed you, didn't we? I didn't answer, not because I didn't know, but because saying it out loud would make it too real. The truth, I wasn't ready for. I finally sat back down. So, what exactly do you need from me? My dad looked away. My mom squeezed her hands together. Hannah, she said in a wavering voice, we need you to help us get out of debt. I inhaled sharply, and not just a little. My dad added, it's quite a lot. I felt something inside me shift, something heavy, something final. They never acknowledged my achievements. They never asked about my struggles. They never offered support when I needed it. But when their world began to crumble, I was the first person they ran to. And for the first time in my life, I didn't know if I was willing to be that person. When my parents finally admitted the amount of debt they were in, it felt like the air in the room grew thicker. My heartbeat slowed. My thoughts tangled. The ground beneath my feet, the ground I spent years steadying myself on, suddenly felt uneven again. This wasn't just about money. This was about a lifetime of roles we'd silently accepted. Roles they wanted me to keep playing. But something had changed, and I wasn't sure those roles fit anymore. Family dynamics cracked in ways I never noticed after my parents confessed the truth. There was an awkward quiet in the room. The kind of quiet that happens when everyone realizes something fundamental has shifted for them. Maybe it was fear. For me, it was clarity. I finally saw our family dynamic from the outside, as if I were stepping out of my old skin and looking back at it. My parents weren't villains. They were flawed humans. But somewhere along the way, they had created a system where Ryan's needs were urgent and mine were optional. And now that their world was collapsing, I wasn't optional anymore. That realization stung more than anything else they could have said. My father broke the silence. Hannah, we know we haven't always shown our appreciation. We know we didn't celebrate your achievements enough. My mother nodded quickly, wringing her hands. But you were always the one we could rely on. We thought you knew how proud we were. I let out a shaky breath. You thought I knew because you assumed my feelings were less delicate. Because I didn't ask for attention. Because I didn't break down. They exchanged guilty looks. They weren't bad parents, but they were blind in ways that left lasting marks. Personal. Introspection, questioning everything I believed about myself. That night, after leaving their house, I sat in my car with the engine off and my hands gripping the steering wheel. My phone buzzed with work emails, friend messages, reminders, life moving at its usual pace. But I felt stuck. frozen in old wounds and new responsibilities. For the first time, I truly questioned myself. Had I become the stable one because I wanted to be, or because I never had a choice? Had I pushed myself so hard because I was driven, or because I was desperate to be seen? If I help now, would it be out of love or out of habit? The questions spiraled, painful, raw, and overdue. My whole identity, the strong one, the successful one, the responsible one, suddenly felt less like praise and more like armor I had been forced to carry. And my parents' request wasn't a simple favor. It was a reopening of every old ache I buried under accomplishments, trying to understand why this happened. The next day, I took off work, not because I wanted to, but because my mind was too crowded to focus. I walked around my apartment, picking up objects without noticing them, trying to piece together the why behind everything. Why hadn't they celebrated me? Why hadn't they noticed my loneliness, my effort, my silent victories? Why did it take a crisis for them to finally see me? By afternoon, I called my mother. "Mom," I said, "why didn't you ever show pride in me the way you did with Ryan?" There was a long pause, then a quiet, broken answer. "I made the mistake of thinking strength didn't need reassurance," she said. "I thought because you didn't ask for attention, you didn't need it." Her voice trembled. "But I was wrong, Hannah. I see that now." Her words softened something inside me, but they didn't erase the years that shaped who I became. The difficult conversations, and the ones we avoided. My parents wanted to talk again that evening. But this time, I brought boundaries with me. We sat down in their living room, but instead of asking what they needed, I asked them something else. "What are you willing to change if I help you?" They blinked. "Change? What do you mean?" I said gently, "Are you willing to treat me as an equal, to acknowledge my achievements, to recognize my place in this family?" My father looked genuinely shaken. Of course. We didn't realize how much we'd fallen short. My mother wiped her eyes. "We want to do better, Hannah. Truly." Their answers were soft, sincere even, but I couldn't ignore the doubt lingering in my chest. Sometimes apologies come easily when people are desperate. Real change comes later, when things aren't falling apart. Still, I appreciated their attempt. It was more acknowledgement than I'd received in years. But before I could respond, my mother suddenly said, "There's something else you should know." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" I asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "This isn't just about money. There's something Ryan did that made everything worse." I felt the air leave my lungs. Something Ryan did. Something that added to their debt. Something they hadn't told me yet. And just like that, the ground shifted again. The betrayal wasn't just from my parents. There was another crack forming, one I hadn't seen coming. My mother's voice trembled when she said Ryan's name, and something inside me went cold. For a moment, I thought I misheard her. But the look on both their faces, shame, fear, hesitation, told me I hadn't. "What did he do?" I asked slowly. My father exhaled heavily, rubbing his temples the way he always did when he was overwhelmed. "It started small," he said, "but it grew, and we didn't realize the extent until it was already too late." My mother looked at me with eyes full of regret. "We were trying to protect him, Hannah. He promised he'd fix it. He said it was temporary. Temporary." The word hit me like a weight. "What did he do?" I repeated. My voice wasn't angry, just tired. Tired in a way that felt deeper than exhaustion, deeper than disappointment. My parents exchanged a glance before my father finally spoke. "Ryan took out multiple loans using our names without telling. U.S. My breath caught. He forged signatures," my mother whispered. "He insisted he'd pay them back before we ever found out. But he didn't. And by the time we discovered it, the interest had grown so much we couldn't keep up." I stared at them, stunned. I shouldn't have been surprised. Ryan had always been reckless, but hearing how far it had gone, it shook me. So you're asking me to help fix something he caused, I said quietly. My father nodded. We didn't want to burden you with this, but we're out of options. Of course, out of options. That was when they finally came to me. Acceptance, the most difficult part. That night, after leaving their house, I drove aimlessly. I didn't want to go home yet. I didn't want to face the swirl of emotions tightening in my chest. I found myself at a quiet park, sitting on a bench under a dim streetlight. The world around me felt frozen, but inside, everything moved too fast. I felt disappointment, not just in Ryan, but in myself, for always hoping my family would eventually change on their own. I felt anger for the way my parents shielded him, even from the consequences of his own choices. I felt grief for the version of my family I had built in my mind, the version that didn't exist. But acceptance isn't a single moment. It's a slow unraveling, a painful settling into reality. And reality was this: my parents needed help, not because they finally valued me, but because their favoritism had finally caught up to them. I wasn't angry at them asking for help. Families help each other. I was angry they only looked at me when everything else collapsed. Strategies for healing when I finally returned home. I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote a list. Not of chores, not of goals, not of achievements. A list for myself, my boundaries, my terms, my emotional limits. Because if I was going to help them, I needed to protect myself first. Point 1. I would not take responsibility for Ryan's choices. 2. I would not become the family's lifelong financial safety net. 3. I would help only if they agreed to change the dynamic, in words and actions. 4. I would not let guilt guide my decisions. 5. I would step away if the burden became too heavy. Writing it felt like reclaiming a part of myself, the part that had spent years bending to fit into a family shape that was never meant for me. The next morning, I called a financial counselor. Not for them, for me. I needed advice before I made any decisions. I needed someone neutral to help me see clearly, because healing wasn't just about forgiving. It was about understanding what I could carry and what I couldn't. Forgiveness, or something else entirely. I went back to my parents' house later that week, list in hand. They looked anxious when I walked in, like they weren't sure if I'd come to help or walk away forever. We sat down again, but this time, everything felt different. I was the one steering the conversation. I'm willing to help, I said. My mother let out a breath of relief, but not without conditions. Their faces shifted. Not angry, not offended, just humbled. What conditions? My father asked quietly. I read from my list, my voice calm but firm. And you must understand this. I am helping because I choose to, not because I owe it to you. My mother wiped her eyes. We'll do anything, Hannah. We just want to make things right. I believed her. For the first time in a long time, I truly believed she meant it. But forgiveness wasn't immediate. It wasn't a switch I could flip. It was a bridge I was willing to start building, slowly, carefully, plank by plank. Because despite everything, they were still my parents. And some part of me still wanted a healthier relationship with them. But I also knew this. Helping them didn't erase the past. And it didn't guarantee Ryan would change. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing peace for myself. And I was finally ready for that choice. But just when I thought things were settling, just when I believed this was the beginning of rebuilding, Ryan showed up at my door. And what he said next changed everything. I wasn't expecting Ryan to show up. Not after everything my parents had confessed. Not after all the years he'd been lifted up while I had quietly carried my own weight. But there he was standing outside my apartment door, hands stuffed into his pockets, eyes avoiding mine like a child caught doing something he didn't know how to explain. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped aside and let him in, not because I wanted to, but because avoiding him wouldn't solve anything. I needed answers, real ones, not the versions sugar-coated by our parents. He walked inside slowly, glancing around as if expecting judgment to be written on my walls. "Mom told me she spoke to you." "That's one way to put it," I said. He winced but didn't defend himself. He didn't sit. He didn't move further in. He stood there like a guest who knew he wasn't welcome. I messed up, Hannah, he said quietly. Badly. The understatement almost made me laugh. You forged their signatures. You took out loans you couldn't pay. You let them drown while they kept saving you. Did you think they wouldn't find out? He closed his eyes briefly. I didn't think. That's the truth. I was overwhelmed. I kept telling myself I'd fix it. But every time I tried, it just got worse. A familiar ache tightened inside me. That was always his pattern. A mistake, followed by panic, followed by parents who swooped in and shielded him from consequences. You could have come to me, I said softly, not offering help, just saying the truth. He shook his head no. I couldn't. You're the one who gets everything right. You never fail. I didn't want you to see how badly I'd fallen apart. That line stung more than I expected. He thought I was untouchable. But the truth was, I was just quieter about my pain. I crossed my arms. Why are you here, Ryan? To apologize? Or because Mom and Dad want you to smooth things over? His shoulders lowered. Neither. I'm here because I know what they asked you to do, and I'm not okay with it. That surprised me. You're not? He shook his head. No. They raised me like I had a safety net for everything. And somewhere along the way, I started believing it. But this is too far. I caused the problem. I should take responsibility. For the first time in years, I saw something in him I hadn't seen before. Accountability. Genuine, shaky, painful accountability. He continued, if you help them, I don't want it to include fixing what I did. That's on me. Ryan, I said cautiously, you can't pay all that back. I know, he whispered, but I can start. And I want to. I need to. Something inside me softened, not enough to forget everything, but enough to finally see my brother as a flawed human being instead of a lifetime of favoritism. I never wanted to be the favorite, he said. I just wanted to be enough. And I guess Mom and Dad's attention made me believe I was doing better than I was. I swallowed hard. And what did my achievements make you believe? That I could never catch up? He admitted quietly. So I didn't try. The honesty in his words hit me unexpectedly deep. For years, I thought Ryan got everything handed to him. And he did. But what I hadn't seen, what I hadn't allowed myself to consider, was the other cost. The pressure of being praised without earning it. The fear of falling short when everyone expected brilliance. The shame of realizing he wasn't who our parents believed he was. I exhaled slowly. So what now? I want to talk to them, he said. Really talk. No excuses. No hiding. I'm not running anymore. And where do I fit into that? I asked. He looked up, eyes filled with something tender and uncertain. You fit wherever you choose. But please don't help them because of me. Help them only if you want to, not because you feel obligated. For the first time, my brother didn't treat me as the reliable sibling, the problem solver, the backup plan. He treated me as an equal. He moved toward the door, but before he left, he paused. Hannah, yeah, I'm proud of you. I always have been. I was just too insecure to admit it. The words landed in my chest like a warm weight, unexpected, overdue, and strangely healing. After he left, I sat in silence for a long time, processing that feeling, breathing, because the truth was my family wasn't perfect. We were messy, flawed, and tangled in decades of uneven love. But maybe, for the first time, we were finally seeing each other clearly. The long-term impact helping my parents didn't magically fix years of imbalance. Forgiving Ryan didn't erase the hurt. And rebuilding trust wasn't a switch. It was slow, careful, intentional. But something new grew inside me. The strength to set boundaries. The courage to speak up. The understanding that I am not responsible for carrying everyone else. Trust was broken, yes. But I wasn't broken with it. I chose to help my parents in a limited, structured way, one that didn't sacrifice my own stability. And Ryan began taking responsibility for his mistakes, slowly rebuilding what he had torn down. Our family isn't perfect, but we're different now. More honest, more aware, more willing to face uncomfortable truths. And me? I learned something I should have known all along. My worth was never determined by how loud others clapped for me, but by how well I finally learned to stand up for myself.